away. Move away, move away, move away. Move away, move away, move away, move away.
By the way, why were the police just standing there? Let me read to you section 176(2) of the Criminal Code. Everyone who willfully disturbs or interrupts an assemblage of persons met for religious worship or for a moral, social, or benevolent purpose is guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction. Well, they were outside a synagogue. They were targeting the synagogue. They said they were, but police were fine with it. It went on for many hours. Joining us now via Skype from Winnipeg, Manitoba to talk about this is our friend Spencer Fernando, the proprietor of SpencerFernando.com. Spencer, great to see you again. It's been too long.
Mm-hmm. Good to see you too.
Your latest article is called "Through His Weakness and Cowardice, Justin Trudeau is Allowing Canada to be Stolen from You by the Anti-Semitic Mobs." It's a very powerful headline. Why don't you unpack that for me? What's your argument?
Basically, that it's we're seeing a battle of wills between, you could say, the lawful authorities and just regular Canadians who support the law and oppose anti-Semitism, and between us and then between people who are obviously anti-Semites, people who have a radical, in many cases Islamist worldview. And so what they're trying to do is they're basically saying we're going to show that we're in control. The laws don't really apply to us because there's more of us than there are of the police, right? So we'll do whatever we want. We'll intimidate people. Obviously, they're trying to push Jewish Canadians out of public life. That's the first step in their plan, obviously, for something much worse. And so it's really a battle of wills. And what Trudeau doesn't understand is, I wrote something for my patron subscribers as well that got into this in more depth. But that really what's happening is, if we give even a little bit of benefit to the doubt to some of the Liberal MPs and say, okay, they think they're doing the right thing. They think if they just appease the pro-Hamas mobs, that something will turn out well for them and that they'll calm down and they'll be, sated by some sort of concession. But they're trying to deal with a group, they're trying to deal with people in the way that you could deal with, people who are rational and reasonable, people who support Western civilization, people who support freedom and democracy. Where, yes, making a concession, making a reasonable shift in someone else's direction can bring about something beneficial. But when you're dealing with people who have an ideology that is all about asserting dominance, imposing fear, I say that the call it pro-Palestinian, but really pro-Hamas movement is a fear-based movement. So it responds to strength. And so when you concede to them, when you give in to them, they say, well, I guess protesting outside of synagogues is working. I guess calling for the death of Israel and the death of Jews is working. And so the government keeps trying to make, one more concession, and then finally they'll be happy. Then they'll calm down. They'll go home. No, it's just going to get worse and worse. And so, in the clip you showed, obviously that's a serious problem because that's about as textbook as it gets with one group saying, oh, look, we're in control now. We if we don't want to be arrested, then we just surround the person and take them away, and the police can't do anything. And so that kind of assertion of dominance is a very serious problem because it's just going to keep getting worse unless the government wakes up and realizes that only strength, only resolve, and only making zero concessions is actually going to start turning things around.
Yeah, I think that's pretty unlikely with Justin Trudeau. But I want to talk about the larger society. Because I remember back to the trucker convoy when the truckers were in Ottawa. I was there for a few days, and I saw a lot of Canadian flags and a lot of Canadian symbols and a lot of handwritten signs. And I spent a lot of time there, and I didn't see any swastikas or any Nazis, but some anonymous photographer snapped a quick picture of a Nazi flag. It looks like it was being held at the fancy Chateau Laurier Hotel there. And this was circulated, and I don't think anyone other than this mystery photographer saw it. It sure felt like it was a setup. Huge coverage, coast to coast. Hundreds of news stories written about the swastika to prove that all the thousands of people there were Nazis because they couldn't find any actual swastikas, but some anonymous photographer found one, so he said. I want to compare that to these weekly hate marches, which have not only sometimes do they have actual terrorist flags, but the chants are, you see Heil Hitler salutes, you see calls for the final solution. There is only one solution, intifada, which is an Arabic word, I guess the Russian word would be a pogrom, basically an anti-Semitic riot. My point is, one fake swastika flag and the entire truckers were demonized unfairly for weeks. But you see hate messages that would curdle curdle milk every single time, and the mainstream media goes out of their way not to report it. There's violence at these protests. The mainstream media says they're peaceful. So what's going on with the media? Why is the entire political media establishment, not the entire, but most of the political media establishment in league with the protesters, or at least not scrutinizing and criticizing them?
I think this is in many ways a long-term consequence of identity politics. The idea that, who someone is, their character, who they are as a person, the value they bring is dependent only on external characteristics. And so, let's do an experiment. Let's pretend that every single element of all these anti-Semitic protests was exactly the same. The chants, the position, where people were standing, everything's the same, except the protesters were all, like 6'3", blonde-haired, blue-eyed men. Right? Everything the same, except the protesters, fit the, the mold of the dangerous anti-Semite, from Germany or something, right? Think of the reaction from Justin Trudeau, every major politician in the Liberal government. They'd be just going absolutely crazy. The media would be going crazy. And so you can have the exact same behavior that we would easily identify. Okay, if it was coming from, white supremacists, people would say this is outrageous, this is unacceptable. People would be melting down. But if it's from people who are identified as, I guess, a victim group, or if they're recent immigrants, or if they're, from a Middle Eastern country, I guess they're just victims of Western imperialism, they can't be held accountable for their actions. And so that's one of the big problems here is you have so many people who their whole worldview is that you judge people by what they look like, not what they do, not what they say, not how they act. And so now, it's like cognitive dissonance, right? Trudeau's his whole worldview has been, everyone from outside of Canada or outside the Western world is just oppressed and, innocent, and we've been so bad to them and we need to be apologetic. And then, it turns out a lot of those people are super anti-Semitic and have extremely hateful views that are basically the same as, Nazi Germany. What to do about that? And it's like they just can't process it, right? They just don't know how to deal with it. So they just kind of pretend it's not happening, right? That's how a lot of people deal with cognitive dissonance is just ignore it. Nothing's happening at all. And so I think that's a very serious problem. And it's not really going to go away because most of the media is now made up of people who went to university. And they were steeped in this worldview for years. And so it's kind of an ongoing problem is they can't accept two things, that someone could be from a traditional victim group and could also be extremely anti-Semitic and have horrible views. And so they just choose to ignore it.